as we go? Really? Do I need to, should I lower it? Am I too loud? Really? Come inside. Igor, use your voice to let people know to come inside, wherever you're at. All right, yeah, so my name is Douglas DeMaio, and I'm here to talk a little bit about the openSUSE project and openSUSE Leap, which is our release, and sorry. Good start. And give you a little background on where the project's headed. So anyway, a little bit about me. I'm a manager, coordinator for the openSUSE project. I do event coordination and sponsor events like this and other ones. I'm sort of a networker with the project. I have a bachelor's, I have a master's. I'll tell you a little bit about that story a little bit later, but some of my hobbies, I like to snowboard, I like to work out, yeah, typical American answers. But I do like to throw these little facts in there, and one of these facts goes back to my bachelor's degree, where I was in Colorado. And so I know two different people that fell off the same building from the same floor. Now, I was only there with one of the people that actually fell off that building that night when he fell off the building, but I was gone after he did it, so, you know, it wasn't me. And that's the famous building there on the left, and that's the university where I attended. And I was also a 40-year-old intern working at Siemens while I was getting my master's. So, you know, I have some really good movie material. So by the end of this, I hope that you will take away from this talk what is openSUSE, what is happening with our distribution, and sort of where we're going next, and then just give you a little bit of information about the project itself and some of the things that are changing within the project. Before I get into the story about openSUSE Leap, a lot of people may have a misunderstanding of what openSUSE is. openSUSE is a project full of other projects. And we do several distributions, but we do build tools, and we basically have an environment where we're hoping that developers can thrive with the things that we make and the brain share that we have. One of our distributions is openSUSE Leap, which is our traditional distribution, and I will talk about that most of this presentation. The other one is Tumbleweed, which is a rolling release, and these are sort of this is the distribution. Tumbleweed is the distribution where basically you're going to get the newest packages. And then we also have some other subset distributions as well. We also do the Open Build service, which allows you to build packages for a variety of other distributions, not just openSUSE, but you can build for enterprise distributions. You can build for Fedora, Ubuntu. So I mean, overall, openSUSE is sort of a position, I guess, as like, we want to be there for the community of open source and the true spirit of it. So, and the other thing we have is OpenQA. I probably won't talk so much about that, but it's a good testing tool to allow developers to maybe pipeline their builds and get some insight on when bugs enter the system and test if things are working or whatnot. A little bit of history about openSUSE Leap. So about the time Tumbleweed really started to get into a position to be sort of our flagship project or distribution. We were doing traditional releases every 6 months, kind of like Fedora does. And I think this was 13.1 was the last one that we did. And what we came up with was the idea to create the distribution where we became closer to the enterprise. And in doing so, we were able to get some source code from the enterprise which is SUSE Linux Enterprise, which is one of the sponsors of our project. So anyway, with that happening, we figured we needed a name change because a lot of people said, oh, I'll use openSUSE, but what of openSUSE are you using? Which distribution? Well, to do that, someone in the community happened to name it Leap. Some people had ideas for doing a Leap Tumbleweed, as they are now, to be called Rock and Roll. I mean, there's a variety of different topics that happened, but we changed the number to 42. So this is one of those things that we wanted to throw a loop into people from, maybe 40 years from now that have to come across something, versioning numbers, where they're going to run into some issues. But anyway, openSUSE Loop had progressed from 42, and then we went back to 15. 15 was sort of a transition because we needed to look at the next release cycle. And so SUSE Linux Enterprise was at 12, and we were at 42, so we came up with the idea, we're just 30, we're plus 30 ahead of the Enterprise. But they ended up having a problem with the number 14, and they changed it to 15. So we had to somehow make some sense of that. So we ended up changing back to 15, and progressing each sort of distribution to make them a little bit closer. And by the last edition, which is currently right now the edition, is 15.3, and in that particular release, we made openSUSE completely compatible source and binary with SUSE Linux Enterprise. So that distribution sort of made them twins. Now, these are some of the ideas that, well, not ideas, but the benefits of it, and how it helps the project. But of course, it only helps the project, based on the use. But anyone that decides to use openSUSE, they also have the advantage where they could move to an enterprise distribution if they need it, and that's something that it happens. And I guess we wanted to be that type of distribution for people so that they could build something and then at least have some long-term support. And if you were there for Marcus Fellner's talk earlier, it kind of basically touches on a little bit of this. So anyway, with Leap, it was really a good moment for us, but on the other hand, we as a project, sometimes I've had this question asked here, and I have it asked in a lot of places. It's like, okay, why should I use openSUSE? And you get this a lot. And the thing is about our project itself, we're just a tool, and this is our mentality of our project. Like, if you need to use the correct tool for the correct job. So if you don't use our distribution, completely understandable, because everyone has certain use cases. Some people have use cases where they need to a fast rolling release. Fine, they can use openSUSE Tumbleweed. Some people that have the idea that I want to refresh mine every few months. Well, then in that case, then openSUSE Leap is not in the category, nor is openSUSE Tumbleweed. So, although you could potentially, with openSUSE Tumbleweed, run a release for quite a long time and then do a zip or dup, so distribution upgrade 6 months later if you wanted to. But anyway, you'd still have the newest stuff. So going on, we have the next distribution should come out on June 8th is what it's scheduled to. That could change potentially, but that's what we're sort of planning on right now. And with 15.4, some of the new things that you'll see in there are the desktop, primarily like the kernel kind of had an upgrade for some years. Sometimes every minor update or every minor release doesn't necessarily get a kernel upgrade. The systemd also came up, and a few other packages. I'll go over the desktop aspect. So with openSUSE Leap, it's traditionally had KDE's LTS version. And that happened actually in the initial beginning of when Leap was established. And so it's been, I don't know how many years it's been, but it's been quite a few years that we've had this LTS. And so this time with our release, we'll have the Plasma 5.24. And that's kind of, don't know if that will be the last LTS, but it's what's going in now. And we also have an update of the GNOME desktop, and that will be 41. Now I know 42 is out right now, but you know, the purpose of Leap really is about the stability, and that was something that that we had determined we were going to stick with. So there are obviously use cases, and we picked it. So as I mentioned earlier, if your use case is this, then you know it'll work for you. Other thing that I would mention, like XFCE. I mean, the last release it did upgrade, so that's pretty. I mean, it was good. It was good an upgrade for XFCE. I mean, I think for them, it's like their first upgrade in like, I don't know, 3 years or something like that. So you don't expect, wouldn't expect like the next version of, say, when we have a Leap 15.5, that there would be an update of XFCE, but we'll see. Yeah, already did that one, sorry. Oh, no, I didn't. I forgot something. So, with this release of Leap, we also have Leap Micro. And with Leap Micro, this is actually out right now. It got released just yesterday, but we're not really making any news about it because the news was coordinated to come out at the same time as the distribution being released on June 8th. And since we had a lot of people in the community who actually voluntarily translated that information, kind of hard to switch it when something happens a little bit faster than you would expect. But anyway, I'll talk a little bit about Leap Micro. So Leap Micro is a small operating system, allows you to be a host OS, a small host OS. You can have various different uses for it, and there is no necessarily desktop portion, so it's basically for containers, servers, whatnot. And you can run it with Cockpit, which is the front end, and that's how you can get that running. You can get that visually running. But then we also have a graphical, well, we have an offline image, but that does offer a visual installer versus the other ones that don't. You kind of have to go through the documentation. You have to put in the correct recommendations that'll get the system going. And that's sort of that last line there where you need you pre-configure the image with a USB, and then you kind of plug that in, and then that thing kicks off, and then you can go to the front end, which is Cockpit, and then set up your stuff to get your containers running or whatever it is you want to run. I mean, if you want to watch a video of it, I've just put that little QR code up there for you and see. And like some of the ideas that we were talking about is like, so what could we actually use this for? There's quite some interesting ideas that can happen, right? I mean, it opens up, I think, a new opportunity for people and having that base layer OS for the security aspect. But one of those that came up, like the Kden Live, would be kind of a cool idea where you have like a cloud Kden, which is a video editing equipment, and if none of you actually know what that is, but so that teams could be distributed and actually work on a project on a free software, right? So that's kind of a pretty cool idea, I thought. By the way, the video in particular is talking about it running in Nginx on a Raspberry Pi, so That's the whole point of that, and it's not like it's not voice, so you're not going to hear anything about that. You'll just see how it works, and it's sort of a learning curve, I think, because, well, I mean, so a little bit about my background, right? I'm marketing and things like that, event coordination. I'm not really a developer, so for me, it's sort of a learning curve, and I think even also some of the people that are involved with the development, it's a learning curve for them because they kind of like, okay, well, so how do I want to use this? You know, but it opens up opportunities for developers. So the one thing that's different about, so we have, as I mentioned earlier, you have SUSE Linux Enterprise, which is the enterprise version. openSUSE Leap is the community version where you could potentially like move to an enterprise version. Same thing happens with this this release of Leap Micro. And the difference is that with Leap Micro, you're going to have like every year you're going to have 2 releases, and it's only going to be supported for a little while during that particular release cycle. But to go to an enterprise version, you can kind of like, which is a lot longer support. You can kind of start out with this, and then like you have a few releases later where you could potentially, if you need to, upgrade to an enterprise version. I don't know, do I have an example of that? Yeah, I do. But not on this slide. So yeah, that kind of explains what I was talking about with the two releases every release cycle. There's another thing called MicroOS that's part of openSUSE, but that's based on Tumbleweed. So with that, like that particular distribution can get upgraded a lot faster, but that's more of like the DevOps side. So if you're looking at something like that, that would work. But you know, that's the main differences. One's based off of a rolling release, the other one's based off a stable traditional release. So as I mentioned earlier, so the example would be, let's say, we could say Leap Micro 5.2. We could also say 5.1. Like the 4 years later, you can see that, I mean, it might be like at that point, like what, 8, might be 5.12 or something like that, or 10. I could do math. So a little bit about what's going to happen after the release. So the release, as I said, comes out in June 8th. And then we do have sort of a shorter release that's going to come out later. Like we're looking at what's planned after openSUSE Leap 15.4 and 15.5. We know we'll have a 15.5, but the 15.5 is probably going to be a very short area. And you can expect what comes after that to have a lot of big changes, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But usually the releases for openSUSE Leap come out about every year. So we'd be looking at Leap 15.5 coming out sometime in 23, but then, like as I said, a short cycle, because the next version, I mean, it could come out, which is, by the way, going to be called Adaptable Linux Platform 4, like the code name we'll say. We don't know what it's going to be called after that, but what we do know is that it's coming, release is coming, but like when it's going to happen, don't exactly know that. But what we are doing within the project is we're trying to create this environment where the community can add their concerns or whatever they're working on, so they could be a part of the building process. That's the spirit of open source, right? So Lubash put this out today, and we're going to have these work groups kind of developing this next, what we call ALP, Adaptable Linux Platform. And as I said, we want the community involved, and we've already done some workshops, but like we want a continuous moving working group going forward, and that'll also work into some of the other working groups that SUSE has itself. So, so I'm kind of getting into the other aspects of openSUSE itself as the project. So I kind of have gotten away from like the future, like what's the future, because we don't really know it exactly, but I'll try to answer some questions later if anyone has some. Flatpak could be one interesting one that someone might want to bring up. But anyway, going into the project itself, we started doing some community meetings, and we do those twice a week. And that all generated and started during the past 2 years, right? So this is the picture. This is not a meeting. It's just a disclaimer, this is not a meeting. This is actually a bar. We have the openSUSE bar. We've done it in a Jitsi account. And so I probably should have made this the last slide. I didn't think about that. But anyway, yeah, they were there like for 200 hours and people were constantly in that bar for 200 hours. And so we were kind of celebrating our release. But, you know, out of this like pandemic, like, you know, it kind of did develop this aspect where we started to kind of come together, and this created more of action within our community, more of us interacting. You know, I'm basically, if there's a lot of different people from a lot of different countries in that picture, but it really did bring us together, and so we started down the path of doing some community meetings. And I don't know if that has anything to do with the next slide, which is increasing users. I have some visuals that I'll put in there about that, but we have seen an increase in usage in the past, like, well, year plus. I don't know how much that has to do with the pandemic. I have my ideas that it has to do with some other things, because if you look at the timing, by the way, these little gaps here, this is just like someone had to fix something. So I'll show in the later slide where some of it's fixed. But you can see here about March of 2021, we just started to see a dramatic increase. And I think, like, this is the theory. I don't know if it's true, but I think this had something to do with CentOS. So if any of you are familiar with CentOS changing their structure on how they were progressing their distribution, we kind of think that's what it was, but we don't really know. And I don't know how much sense it would make with Tumbleweed for that, but we did see quite a bit of growth. So I'll show you the next slide, which actually fixes that area toward the right there. And it had a continuation. Now, the downslope here is really, it's in both slides, it's actually that way. But that last portion, you can't really tell, like if it's going to go down or which way it's going to trend. I did want to throw this information in there about the Open Build service. So if any of you are interested in like building, you have various different architectures you can build on, and you have a lot of different packages that can be built. And so, you know, we try to provide insight. The community itself wants to give everyone as much transparency as possible, you know, because that's what we try to do. I mean, that comes down to work, though, because someone's going to do the work. And one of the other things I want to talk about was the code of conduct. The openSUSE project has not had a code of conduct for a while. It has had guiding principles, and we kind of, the past couple months, have created this code of conduct, and I did that with a few other people. We ran across the community to get their feedback before actually like implementing it. And we did, and that actually came out of one of the out of one of the community meetings, is where it was driven. The openSUSE project has a board, and people that are on the board, they have, well, they don't make any technical decisions. They kind of make decisions that help the project to be just to go forward, you know. And if there's any issues with conflicts, they try to resolve that. So that's kind of what the openSUSE board does. But this was brought up for them, and also was brought up to the community, and then we kind of resolved that. The way we tried to mirror this is we took a lot of the, right, like open source. The idea is we took a lot of the projects that we interact with and took their information and tried to mesh it as much as we could, because we have when we go to conferences and other things, like we all share a common vision, and there's a lot of things we have in common, and so we wanted to make it try to make it as close as we could to them, and took the best things that we felt that each one of them had and included it in ours. So, and we wanted to make it a running document, of course, because I think that's pretty vital to success. And I'm getting close to the end. So we have the openSUSE conference coming up, and that's going to be June 2nd through 4th. If you're interested in coming, you're more than welcome to. It's a free event. It'll be streamed. You can also participate online. Just go to events.opensuse.org. And we have a few sponsors that are a part of it. There's a beer garden outside. If any of you've ever heard of Rockin' Park, which is basically a big concert, you'll be able to sit there in the beer garden, watch some open source talks, and listen to Green Day that'll be playing like a kilometer away. You can actually hear the band, so that's my selling point. So anyway, I want to thank you. I want to thank every one of you that have attended, and then especially our volunteers that have helped out, and the organizers for the conference. So I appreciate it. And if you have any questions, there might be a little gift or something. Who knows? Any questions? Flat pack? So there are a couple of, with flat packs, and I don't know how many of you know what flat packs are, but I guess they're kind of like a wrapper, I guess, for applications that allow you to run applications across different distributions. And so was it 2 weeks ago in Italy, there was the Linux Application Summit. And this is, it's not, distributions that don't only work with flat packs. There's Igor, he's here from Ubuntu. You could talk to him about that. Ubuntu has things called snaps. We include that also in Tumbleweed. And then there are things called app images. And so with these, they basically allow you to have a certain runtime and run your applications on build the application, have it run on all different distributions. And so when we look at the next release, when we look at Adaptable Linux Platform and ALP, the idea is probably that there'll be some things where I think people will receive a lot of benefit from using flat packs, because it kind of allows us to focus more on the hardware, or sorry, the area that we need to focus on as an operating system. So that's kind of, I guess, what I would say about that. It's, we've had an openSUSE survey. We've surveyed our community. There's a lot of packagers. They enjoy doing that. But again, this whole thing is there's some kind of contradicting points, so that's why we want people in the community to participate in the development. So I hope I answered that okay. Yeah. But you already have one of these, but maybe I'll give you a bag. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I couldn't actually hear the question.
For example, on Ubuntu, for snaps, there's some icons, some applications, like Firefox is now exclusively on Snap. If you don't What I dislike in Ubuntu, they're forcing snaps. It's okay to offer two options, but having Firefox by default on snaps and having a lot of trouble to install Firefox the old way, that's the part I don't like. Is there some plan for Flatpak in SUSE like that?
Well, okay, so if you go to FlatHub, that's where you'll see how you can install it on that local machine, like whatever distribution you're running, because it is quite different in that realm. openSUSE itself, though, has traditionally, and I would imagine will continue to be, a distribution of choice, because we have so many things that we do offer, because as I said earlier, like, we try to give as much as we can, but you can't be everything to everybody. So, but I would say that, you know, if you have any opinions about it, you know, we'd be more than happy to hear it. And I wouldn't imagine that that we would try to put limitations on people, but, you know, that's sometimes choices that have to be made, you know. But I can't be so clear because I'm not on the desktop team, you know, and I'm not part of the development. So, yeah, Hans.
Glad to hear so. Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, maybe to add to that a little bit, Doug, I think that in openSUSE the necessity to force a single channel is definitely not there because of Open Build Service. Open Build Service is the platform that builds all the RPMs and apps in all the formats, also for other distributions. So there's no technical reason why openSUSE would ever restrict anything either to Snappy or Flatpak or whatever. Isn't that the case also, Doug?
What was the last thing? Sorry.
I think that on openSUSE there's just no technical need to divert from the choices you have because of Open Build Service, because you can just build everything, every package for every platform, in every way. So there's no limitation there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean...
Trying to help you out here.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, yeah. I don't know, Hans, I think you already have one. But, well, any other questions, by the way? Maybe? Would you mind handing it to? Thank you. Thank you. All right. So, let's get a beer. Yeah. Thank you.